Hello everyone, welcome to Adbest channel. A few hours ago, we had an important update from Department of Homeland Security. DHS published this final rule. It's going to impact about 1.18 million international students. It's one of the biggest changes that I've ever seen so far in immigration, and it's going to change quite a few things for existing students as well as future students who want to study in the US, because it really changes the game. And with the H1B lot and all of these things, so this is going to be a big one, right? So what we'll do in this video, we'll look at what the new rule says and what does that really mean and what is changing from now and what will look in the future and what is the situation for current students and how the transition would work and what are your future options right around this and how will the day one CPT thing work. All of these things we will cover in this video. So it's kind of it's in fact a 533 page document of ruling that has came out with all the comments and everything. So we try to simplify it as much as we can, and there'll be more guidance that's coming in, but this is our first hunch of what has come out. Yeah. So this is the rule that is currently in Federal Register that you can see on the screen. So it will be published officially tomorrow. But currently we have a document that we can see, and that's about a 530-page document that has come up. Just to understand the scale of impact that this rule has is it's going to impact about 1.18 million international students. Every year about 880K students come in on out of these, right? So this is the kind of impact that it will have. It's not a small rule, right? And also just to give you a split of who all it will impact. So just these are a couple of years old data, right? 2024. You see about 420,000 visas were issued. So about similar or more, right? Roughly that, and there is about J1 visas about 355K. And if you see the graduate students that are enrolled, it's about 500 and close to 500K, and this is about 400K. So you can see it's about 800 to 900K students, and and including OPT ones, that's going to be more, right? So the scale of impact is really tremendous, right? So that's why it's one of the biggest things that I would have seen. It's so now, just to set background so that everybody are aware of how things work today, right? Is essentially for the last 45 years, essentially the way it used to work is F1 students would come into the US and they would get something called D/S in their I-94. It is nothing but duration of status. And there is no fixed end date on I-94. And the idea was you could come into the US, you could study, and then if you want to study more, you can study, and you can continue to study. There was no end date to that, right? You could, and this was kind of a loophole that is exploited by some people, so that's the reason they're saying that, this is a loophole that, their people are not exiting. They come in and they continue to stay, and it's creating all these things. So this is one of those things that has been on the agenda for many years and never happened. So that's one of the reasons they're telling. So it was usually going through DSO, and they would get a new identity and you could stay. It was never going to the DHS or USCIS to look at the status and all sorts of things. So that is the biggest change that's coming in, right? So with the new rule, what's happening is that they are really capping the I-94 duration that you get. So I-94 is nothing but when you enter the country, you are given a piece of paper telling that this is how long you can stay. So currently there is no limit. It says, you can stay as long as you are maintaining status. Now with this new rule, that is going to be limited to the program length. Let's say your program length, let's say you're going for masters and they give you the program length is 2 years. Now you'll get visa, your I-94 for the 2 years means you have to leave the country after 2 years. That's what it really means. And they're capping it to 4 years. Let's say even you get a PhD program, then they could probably limit it to 4 years, and then and again, this is not a lifetime cap. You can apply for extension after that depending on situations, right? And they also shortened the grace period from 60 days to 30 days. Let's say your program ends, then in the past you had 60 days grace period. Now that has come down to 30 days. And also the unlawful presence, basically, this is a big one. Unlawful presence is something when you violate status, when something wrong happens, all of these, right? So unlawful presence is now automatic. It automatically accrues once the fixed period expires, and basically once your time exits, right? So that is the point, right? So the biggest thing here is the CPP officer will make a decision and issue the I-94, and you will have to depart the country when that thing happens. Now, there are a couple more things on the, let's say you, for whatever reason, your program get extended or whatever happens with your program because you're majoring, whatever, right? Then what has to happen is you need to file something called an extension of stay, which is with USCIS. You need to submit form I-539, and the filing is about $430 as of now, right? And for that, Then when you apply for that, then USS will look at all your information and then they will extend it. So currently the processing times for these I-539 forms is crazy, so I don't know when, how it's pretty long. So these were all the H4 and H4EDs are getting stuck because of that. So the problem is not the extension, it's also the delays. And also what we don't know is the guidance that will come in with this, right? Like, let's say when you extend the program, do they still require the financial requirement? How are you going to prove that you'll return back? So we don't know what are the things they will ask, because this is a non-immigrant visa. Unlike an H4 or another visa, this is a non-immigrant visa. So we'll have to see what comes out of it. But the point is that, you will have to, if your program extends over 2 years, then you need to do this, extension of stay need to file. And also, alternatively, like what you could also do is you could exit the country and again enter with the valid visa, so that you can get a new I-94 until the program ended, right? So, and again, these 4 years and all of these things come in. So this 240 days, what you see is basically, let's say you are employed on campus and a job, and now suddenly your program is extended for whatever reason. Then until you wait, you can work for up to 240 days. So that is what they're saying. You can continue to do on-campus employment for up to 240 days, and after that you need to stop. That's what it's saying, right? And also the thing is, when you go for this extension of stay, there could be biometrics, they could re-vet you financially, there could be background evidence, that is, you need to provide all sorts of things. So that's what we'll see more on that, how that will work once the details come out. But that's what the initial things say, right? And what is happening with the current students? So this is probably the biggest one that you need to be aware of, right? So the current students are also going to be impacted with this. So what they're doing is they are not immediately switching to this fixed thing. So you keep whatever the existing students, they will keep the duration of status as long as they keep studying, right? And again, until the 4-year transition period ends, So until September 15th, they can continue to do that. But you may still need to get your I-94 program end date, or 4 years after the effective date, whichever comes first. So basically, let's say you have an I-20 right now and you're studying, you can study until the program end date, or 4 years after the effective date, which is basically until September 30th. And you should have been admitted in using, and should have given the duration of status. So some of these things will come out when the DSOs will start implementing this. There'll be more guidance coming in. This is based on what we read in the document and what they say, right? So that's what it was, right? And also for current students, what happens if you travel is, if you're staying in the US, you keep this duration of status open and for the transition, and there is no I-94 correction required, and you can study until the program end date or September 15th, 2030, and you don't need extensions. But if you travel abroad, then you will get a new I-94 based on the fixed new rule. After, I mean, this is once this is effective, right? Because when you are leaving the country, right, you will get a new I-20, and at that time your DSA will issue an I-20 with a new date. So you will get your I-94 according to that. So you lose out all the benefits of what you have currently. So basically, that is one of the biggest things. Like if you travel now, you're going to lose the benefit that you currently have. That is the one. And also they're giving 6 months, literally about 6 months to close to grace period after this is effective. So for OPT filings. So what it means is that, right, after this becomes effective, until March 18th of next year, there is a grace period. So you don't need to file extension of status, when you're filing an OPT or STEM OPT. There is no EOS required with I-539. So this is the grace period that they're giving. So basically, if you're graduating in fall, you're okay. But if you're graduating next spring, you really have to time it well, so that you can apply up to 90 days before the program end date or the graduation date. So if you time it well, then you could basically file for this OPT, by March 18th, so that you don't have to file this extension of stay document, right? So that's why if you're graduating next spring, you need to really plan it, work with the DSO on how these things will work. So you may be able to get away with that. So you'll have to plan it, and we'll see how the guidance comes out as well, right? So. And also, one more important thing is, if you depart US, after filing your OPT, then you must file your OPT as well as the extension of stay on re-entry. And again, the employment thing, the 240 days will still apply here as well. And you'll have cap gap protections. So no changes there as well. So this is important. So if you are in the US, and then do not travel. So that is the simple message of that, right? And some of the important things that are also allowed as part of this new regulation are that, you can go upward progression, meaning that you enter US for bachelor's, you can go to master's or PhD. You can only go. You cannot really do same level. For example, you have a master's, you can't do a second master's at the same level. It is not allowed generally, right? And each program gets its own fixed admission period, and and also moving up the level will also need an extension of stay or a port of entry. You need to re-enter the country, right? And a PhD concern raised. I mean, uh, so the other thing what we're trying to tell is that, and it applies prospectively for programs done before 2026 don't count. What it means is that it applies to only future programs, not the ones that are currently going on, right? So that's what it is. So the biggest thing that you see here is that people were trying to they would go get a master's and then they apply for H1B, they don't get an H1B and they enroll another master's, and then they go for another H1B program lottery next year. So this was the kind of loop that was happening. Now that cannot be done because technically you cannot get a second master's now because you're restricted. You can only go for a PhD, and getting a PhD admission and all of that requirements are not going to be straightforward. They'll also you'll also have to convince the USAS also now because they need to provide you that. So it gets more and more complicated. And day one CPT will talk about what it is, right? So day one CPT and CPT programs are technically not banned as per this rule, but it really squeezed now. You can't really, like in the past, people were doing day one CPTs and keeping on extending and staying in the country and working and all of that, right? Now that's not going to be possible because you can't get a second master's. And if you have even CPT is allowed in general. But now with the 4-year rule, you're kind of, if you're even joining in a day one CPT kind of a school from the first day, you're really squeezed on how much CPT you can get because the maximum allowed is, I think, 240 days or so, right? So you're really like now the day one CPT program, abuse will really fall significantly because the scope is really gone now. So that's why this is really targeted around that, right? And coming to the new limits on transfers, right? Now, if you go to the US an undergraduate student, you cannot do school transfer in the first academic year. And you cannot also change your program in the first year. And you must complete your first year at the school that issued a I-20. And, only unless they're extenuating circumstances. So these extenuating circumstances means something that are beyond your control. They don't give a definition of that, but essentially these are disaster scenarios like, okay, the program shuts down or something has happened to the school, something that is beyond your control. So those kinds of things. It's not like you don't like the program or you don't like the school, you don't like the city. All of these things are no longer, you cannot do that. Now coming to graduate program, which is for master students, you cannot change the education objective. Basically, you can't change your program. Basically, if you go for masters in computer science, you can't, now go to an MBA. You can't change your program now, and you can't change schools at any point of time. You can't. What that means is you go to, I don't know, Harvard right now. You have to stick with Harvard. But let's say you go to a program like an ABC school, then you can't change to a better school even if you get an admission. And they put these exceptions, extenuating circumstances, which is kind of a broad thing, and it's going to be very strict how they'll adjudicate. So we'll see how that thing's, right? And again, this is aimed at people trying to jump schools, back and forth, and trying to do all sorts of things. So that's why it's targeted towards that, right? And in terms of OPT, there are no changes to OPT. Again, there is more friction. You need to file now, extension of stay when you actually, do the OPT thing. That is the one thing. And also when you do STEM OPT also, you'll also maybe need to file an extension of stay. So that is what, you will have to do with these things, right? And CapGov rule is also not changed. But again, you will have to watch out the overlaps and all of that, right? The CapGap still exists, so bridge for the start date. But again, but you'll have to really figure out, this could be complicated when your program is ending and you file an extension of stay. So all of these things can play out. So if you are changing from F1 to H1B, the change of status still processed BOS as before, but you'll have to really watch out the overlaps, how these things will play. The CapGap rule is not essentially changing as per the regulations. So there's a lot to take, guys, what has come up, right? And we will see more and more guidance, and we will do more videos guiding students, on how these things will work. See, personally, when I was in the US, the first thing I did was I changed my school in the first week. It doesn't happen very often. I had to change my school because of some complicated scenarios that I ran into in the first school. I changed in the first week, and after that, I know hundreds of students who change schools after the first semester, and which is very common because of various things that can happen at the school. You get funding in another university, and all of these things. Now, all of this is gone. So you are really now restricted when you take an admission and you get stamping. Then you, if you go to a school, you are really stuck with that school. You can't really move. So it's a huge deal. So it's going to change how international students will approach this. So we'll do more on this and the kind of impact that it can have. But in short. The duration of status is ending for new F1 students, meaning you get a fixed I-94 date and it's capped at 4 years. And it's effective from September 15th of this year, right? So for the fall students, you will kind of miss that, but some of you may be part of that as well. But yeah, this is what we'll see. And the grace period is ending from 60 days to 30 days. And there is a transition period for current students. For they're giving about 6 months to do or some of these things. So you will have to work with your DSO very closely on how these things will really pan out. So it's going to be very complicated with the delays with all of these things. So we'll have to see more guidance will come. Do subscribe for getting regular updates. We will continue to post updates on this. Again, thanks for watching.